I'm setting up my 55-pound dumbbells real fast. I was saying, so my wife wants to put them in the stroller, and I want them to walk around a lot. I think that being in the stroller, but we're gonna be with other people, so the stroller will be nice to keep pace with all the other adults, because everyone else is the only ones with little kids. And then on the flip side, I think the stroller would be good if they get tired, because they can just fall asleep. Because I want to be at Disneyland all day. I like Disneyland at night when it's dark. I went to Disneyland, I think the first time when I was like 4 years old. And we were there like late at night. And that's when they have like all the like different lights and stuff that you don't see in a day. It's really cool. All right. 55 pounds. So this is going to be the first time doing the 55 pounds for sets of 15. What's up, King Barrel? It's been a long time. How you doing, man? Oh, no, it's just for the bench press. Man, you guys as swimmers are giving us a run for our money. I didn't realize you guys don't make swimming in the Olympics easy, do you? Australia is a pretty awesome team. Yeah, but this happens every Olympics. We do well in anything involving water. So we take the gold lead at the start, and then we don't do any other medals. I mean, at least you guys do good in something. I mean, there's some countries that never place. I just think you guys do so well in the water because you have so many crocodiles, alligators, sharks, box jellyfish. I just imagine that being able to swim super fast in Australia is an imperative, or is necessary for staying alive. Hero says all the water events are in the front, loaded at the start. Yeah, when I was young, Michael Phelps was still in it. Man, that guy looks like he was genetically made for that sport. Yeah, I think it's our sports and how close we are to the water, says King Barrel. Yeah. You guys do really good at that sport. We we aren't picking up quite that many golds ourselves. We have, last I checked, we had the most amount of medals, but not so many golds. Japan and China keep like just getting more golds than us. But then eventually, this happens like every Olympics though. China and other countries will lead us in golds, and then we get to the more obscure sports, and then we like just start picking up more and more golds. Like we thrive on obscurity. Says usually with the USA, it's that you guys kind of do decent in a lot of events, and by the end of it, it adds up. Yeah, I think it's an economic thing when you have the money to support more teams, and you have lots of people putting up money. That helps. I guess our like water polo team, the girls one, was being supported by Favor Flav, the rapper. So my wife was telling me. Kimura says, I think team sports is a real big winner for you guys. I feel like you guys have a good teams in a lot of sports. Yeah. Well, and I think sometimes what people forget about the United States is how big we are. Um, Especially if you're like a European country. Like you might think like, oh, Germany, and then there's the United States, but like America covers so much more territory than a lot of other countries. So we have a lot more people to pull from. And because we have more cities and more towns and counties, then we have more people competing on individual teams. So I would be surprised if we don't have like some of the, more, or we don't have just more team sports as a country than other countries. Because even Australia is huge, but so much of Australia is, desert. So your population centers are not as big, or they're very condensed. So you're not going to have as many team sports. What surprised me is how many we sent. We have a high amount of athletes for how small our population is. Yeah, but you guys are a sturdy group of people. Most of Australia comes from sturdy stock. There's only the strongest survived. That's kind of where the benefit of the U.S. comes from too. You had to be strong to make it here. You couldn't be soft. Australia is definitely not known for having soft people. One of my greatest shames as a family is my cousin went to Australia, was sent to volunteer to go to Australia to do some work on a ranch there, and he was supposed to be there for I think like a few months, like during the summer. It was supposed to be part of his gap year, and he like came home like after 2 or 3 weeks, couldn't hack it, and I was so disappointed. I was like, you just made all of us look so weak as a family. You're such a, you shamed us in Australia. Such a, you know, very frustrating. King Burrow says, sports are definitely the lifeblood of Australia. Not to make assumptions, my theory is that we don't really have a strong cultural identity, so we cling to things like sports. Yeah, that makes sense. I think that's probably fair. I'll think about that. That sounds good. Yeah, my cousin shamed shamed our family. I always think that Australians must all look down on us because of my one cousin. And we come from a hard stock. Like my great grandfather was a coal miner. I've worked hard. I never would have quit. You would have had to kill me to get me to give up working in Australia. Hero says, like in the scheme of things, we are relatively a new country. Yeah. Plus, you have that weird thing for a long time. Not weird. I guess it's understandable. But you guys had like a class problem for a while there because you had like upper class people. Well, first you had all of the prisoners, the debtors, and different people get shipped down to Australia from the bottom of British class system. And then after a while, a bunch of rich guys showed up to make money. So then you got dominated by this upper class, and that upper class was obsessed with royalty and proving that they were good British subjects. So that like was a weird part of your. It's not weird. I don't mean to say weird, but it was part of your identity, where you had part of the country that was like, we want to be our own selves and we don't want to be ashamed of our heritage. And then you had another side that was like, we're going to be upper class and we want to show England that we're not just a bunch of prisoners and that we're better. So Hero says, not to talk down on my own country, in terms of things that are distinctly Australian, I feel like we don't have much other than our environment and animals. Oh man. I think you and Shane Gillis would feel the same. No, but that's not. I mean, I understand what you're saying, but just because you're Australia doesn't mean that British history isn't a big factor of your history. Bro says like we don't have any specific food or cultural festivals that are like unique to Australia. Well, I mean, neither does the United States. I mean, outside of like the 4th of July, and we have Thanksgiving, so we have 4th of July and Thanksgiving. But those are the only like really unique, and being having a meal where you're thankful is not like some great cultural feat. Burgers and apple pie, but our burgers are from Germany. Our apple pies, I think, are uniquely American. But I don't know. Did you know that pies? I found this interesting. Pies are originally designed for the preservation of the food in them. Like you're not originally the crust was just to keep food inside that you could eat for like months. And they would make like pies and the food would just be in there and then you break open the crust and you eat. It's an early form of like refrigeration. The crust was never something you were supposed to eat. Cajun and jazz. Yeah, I mean, I guess you could say jazz is American. I mean, we definitely innovate and add and create things. Um, I think the thing that we brought to the world the most is our love of freedom. Even though we can deprive other countries and people of it, our desire to be free and of ourselves and say whatever we want. Australia has like pavlova, and that's the debate since it's half claimed by New Zealand and since it's invented by a New Zealander in Australia. Yeah, I only know about that because of the show Bluey. So I had to look that up because I guess Pavlova was a ballerina, a famous ballerina that visited Australia or something like that. But yeah, I was reading about the debate between New Zealand and Australia. That's the thing that makes me hesitate the most is when I hear it's more common with New Zealanders, but you hear the accent and you can't tell right away if it's someone from New Zealand or someone from Australia. And people get real upset when you make the mistake. But I would say Australia does has more going for it than as far as a country that Americans know more about is Australia than New Zealand. New Zealand is only popular because of Lord of the Rings, and they have bunkers for the ultra rich in case things go wrong. And their sheep fetish. I don't know if that's a real thing in New Zealand, but it's something that they get made fun of here. Is how much they love sheep in a very physical sense. How much they love sheep. There's a lot of New Zealand jokes. So that's something you got better than New Zealand for sure. No one makes fun of you guys for making love to sheep. Don't even get me started on accents. You'd be surprised about the many different accents there are in Australia. There's not just one accent. I know that's the crazy part. Have you heard the prevailing theory that the Australian accent is was derived from an English accent or Irish accent of being spoken by people that are drunk? There's a theory that the prisoners that were sent to Australia and stuff, they spent a lot of time drunk, so their kids heard them primarily speaking being slurred. So that's how the Australian accent developed, was from listening to their drunk parents. Yeah. And if you look back, there were a lot of like, you guys had some serious prohibition for a long time. Seems like they were doing everything they could to stop Australians from drinking. But what else are you gonna do? I mean, like now we have a lot of sports and things that you love to, you love to do in the water, but then you farm and drink. Try not to get killed by the sun and drink. That was, you know, and I would say like, okay, there's hunting, like you go crocodile hunting and hunt things, but then, what better way to hunt crocodiles and alligators than drunk? Seems like you'd have to be drunk to take that on in the first place. Kimbero says, I'm not an anthropologist, but I wonder if it's also to do with Chinese people, since we had a lot of Chinese people living in Australia since the gold rush, and the Chinese have a lot of tonal languages. So I feel like a lot of our speaking is flowy and tonal. That's a really interesting theory. That's interesting. I don't know. I'd have to look up what your guys' Chinese population is. We had a big Chinese population, and then our government worked really hard to kill them off or let them die off. We stopped letting Chinese women migrate, and then we stopped letting Asians migrate to the U.S. because they were hoping after the gold rush that they could stem that population and make that population of Chinese in the U.S. disappear. Mandarin is the second most spoken language in Australia. Oh, I didn't know that. That's fascinating. I speak some Mandarin. My favorite thing in the world is when you have somebody that's from someone that's Chinese that either speaks with a Western accent or Australian accent or a British accent. But not so much the British, because there's a lot of Chinese in Hong Kong and stuff that have British accents, but that very, like when they talk like a cowboy, and that's them. That's not an affectation. That's just how they were raised. That cracks me up. That's always a fun one to hear. All right, going down to the 50 pounds now. Did 3 sets of 15 with the 55 pounds, 1 set of 11, and now dipping down to 50 pounds. Hero says we are a Western country, but it's easy to forget that aside from New Zealand, all our neighbors are Asian countries. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I would find that fascinating when you think about it, especially in the context of World War II. That became very obvious during World War II that Australia was surrounded. Have you ever heard of there was this crazy thing that happened, not crazy, interesting thing that happened in Australia during World War II. The African American servicemen were not segregated from white women in Australia, and white women in Australia didn't have any problems dating or being associated with African American soldiers, and this caused a huge problem for racist white Americans that got very upset about it, and this was a big problem. Eventually, there was a riot, but there was a riot between Australians and Australian servicemen and American servicemen, because the Japanese would drop pamphlets on the Australian servicemen and say, "Hey, like, why are you here fighting us when the Americans are in your country now, sleeping with your wives?" And so they would just get all these pamphlets talking from the Japanese saying that American men were sleeping with their wives, and you know, it worked. It caused a riot. People got very upset with the idea. They're very, very brilliant on the Japanese part. Yeah. Plus, at some point there was